Before we begin, a quick message from our sponsors. Your support helps us keep bringing you new sleep stories for free. You won't be bothered by any ads once the story begins.
We all have routines. I'm Jabron, and with diabetes, mine was finger sticks. Sometimes, I skip them because it hurt. The Freestyle Libre 3CGM changed that. It gives me glucose insights without finger sticks. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
Finger sticks are required if your glucose alarms or readings do not match symptoms, or when you see check blood glucose symbol for the first 12 hours. The views expressed should not be used for medical diagnosis or treatment as a substitute for professional medical advice. Individual circumstances may vary. For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Now with McDonald's, wake up to a $4 breakfast meal deal. Wake up to a sausage McMuffin or sausage biscuit, to hash browns, and wake up to a hot coffee. Get your $4 breakfast meal deal.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where tonight you are invited to drift gently into a quiet summer evening toward a hidden village preparing for the soft glow of the Firefly Festival. Settle in now, wherever you are. Let your body become heavy in the most comforting way, as though the surface beneath you has been waiting all day to hold you. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands rest. Let your jaw loosen just a little. There is nothing to solve here, nothing to hurry toward, nothing you need to carry with you into the story except the simple rhythm of your breath. Breathe in slowly and breathe out. Again, a little deeper this time, as if you are breathing in the warm sweetness of a summer meadow after sunset. The air is gentle, the light is low. Somewhere far away, crickets begin their evening song, each tiny note folding itself into the quiet. A breeze moves through tall grass, slow and silver, brushing seed heads against one another with a soft, whispering sound. Tonight's story takes you to a small valley village where, once every year, the people gather beside the river to welcome thousands of fireflies, rising like living stars. Imagine yourself on a narrow path at the edge of a meadow. The day has nearly finished. The sky is still blue, but only faintly now, deepening at the edges into violet and lavender. Along the path, white wildflowers bow their heads. The leaves of the trees are still warm from the sun, and the scent of grass, rain-washed stone, and distant wood smoke drifts gently through the air. With each breath, the world becomes quieter. With each breath, you release a little more. And as the path leads onward, your own thoughts may begin to loosen and fade. Like lantern light softened by mist, you do not have to follow them. You do not have to hold them. Let them drift away into the evening while the story continues on its own. At the far end of the meadow where the path bent beneath an arch of willow branches, there stood a village called Lumen Vale. It was not a large village. It had no tall towers, no busy streets, no grand market square filled with shouting voices. It was a village of mossy roofs and round windows, of wooden footbridges and flower boxes, of gardens that spilled over stone walls in waves of lavender, mint, and pale blue blossoms. A clear river curved through the center of the village, gentle and patient, reflecting the sky in long ribbons of fading color. All year, Lumen Vale was peaceful. But on one evening near the warm heart of summer, it became something almost magical. This was the night of the Firefly Festival, For as long as anyone could remember, the fireflies came to the valley on this particular night. Not one or two, not a scattering here and there, but thousands upon thousands, rising from the reed beds, from the meadows, from the shadowed banks of the river, until the entire valley glimmered as though the stars had decided to come down and rest among the flowers. No one in Lumen Vale knew exactly why they came. Some said it was because of the river, which carried old moonlight in its water. Some said it was because of the bellflowers that bloomed only at midsummer and gave off a scent too delicate for human noses to understand. Others said the fireflies remembered an ancient promise made long ago between the earth and the sky, and returned each year to keep it. But most people did not worry too much about the reason. They simply prepared. All through the day, the villagers had moved slowly and happily through their small tasks. Linen cloths were shaken out and laid across long wooden tables. Jars of honey were carried from cool pantries. Loaves of soft bread were wrapped in clean towels. Children gathered fallen petals to scatter along the path to the river. Elderly neighbors sat on porches tying tiny ribbons around bundles of lavender, their hands moving with the ease of long practice. By the time evening began to settle over Lumen Vale, everything was ready. The story follows a girl named Elian, though she was not so little anymore. She was at that gentle age between childhood and growing up, when the world still seemed full of secret doors. But she had begun to understand that some of them could only be opened by patience. Elian lived in a small cottage at the western edge of the village with her grandmother Mara, who was known for making the softest lanterns in the valley. Not the brightest lanterns and not the grandest, but the softest. Her lanterns glowed with a warm, golden calm, the kind of light that made tired people speak more quietly and restless children grow still without knowing why. Their cottage smelled of beeswax, chamomile, dried orange peel, and old wood, polished by many hands over many years. Bundles of herbs hung from the beams. The windows looked out toward the meadow where the first shadows of evening were already spreading. Elian sat at the kitchen table, carefully threading a pale green cord through the handle of a small paper lantern. The lantern was shaped like a bellflower with curved petals made from thin cream-colored paper. Grandmother Mara had painted the edges with a wash of blue so light it was almost a memory of color. "That one will be lovely by the river," Mara said, her voice soft as folded linen. Elian smiled and held it up. The lantern turned slightly in the air, catching the low light from the window. "Do you think the fireflies will come early this year?" Elian asked. Mara was pouring warm tea into 2 small cups. The steam rose in quiet curls. "They come when the valley is ready," she said. Elian looked toward the meadow beyond the glass. The tall grass moved in a long sigh beneath the evening breeze. "How does the valley know it is ready?" Mara set down the teapot and considered the question, as if it deserved all the time in the world. "Perhaps the valley grows quiet enough to hear them," she said. Elian liked that answer. It felt true in the way some things did, even when they could not be measured or explained. They drank their tea slowly, listening to the cottage settle around them. Outside, a robin gave its last few notes from the apple tree. A cart rolled by on the lane, its wooden wheels creaking softly. Someone laughed in the distance, and then the sound faded. When the lantern was finished, Elian and Mara gathered the others from the shelf near the hearth. There were 7 in all, each shaped like a different summer flower. A bellflower, a poppy, a moon daisy, a clover blossom, a foxglove, a sprig of jasmine, and one very small lantern, shaped like a closed bud, which Mara said was for wishes not yet ready to open. They did not light the lanterns yet. That would happen near the river, just as the last rim of sun slipped behind the hills. Elian carried them carefully in a wide basket, cushioned with a soft cloth. Mara took her walking stick and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, though the evening was warm. Then together they stepped out into the lane. Lumen Vale had changed in the golden hour. The houses, usually quiet and humble, seemed to glow from within. Windows were open, and the scent of baking fruit drifted into the street. Porches were hung with garlands of leaves and tiny glass beads that trembled whenever the breeze passed through them. Along the lane, villagers walked toward the river carrying baskets, blankets, cups, lanterns, and small offerings of flowers. No one rushed. That was part of the custom. On the night of the Firefly Festival, people walked slowly. They spoke softly. They gave the evening room to arrive. Elian and Mara passed the baker's house, where old Thomas stood at his gate with a tray of sugared plum cakes. He offered them each one, wrapped in a square of paper. "For later," he whispered, though no one had asked him to whisper. Mara thanked him, and Elian placed the cakes in the basket beside the lanterns. Farther along, they passed the fountain, where children floated flower petals on the water. The petals moved in little circles, pink and white and yellow, drifting around one another as though learning the steps of a slow dance. One child, a boy with dark curls and serious eyes, held up a petal in his cupped palms. "This one is for the smallest firefly," he said. Elian nodded solemnly. "Then it should be a very gentle boat." The boy seemed pleased by this, and lowered the petal back into the fountain with great care. Beyond the fountain, the lane widened into a grassy path that led down toward the river fields. Here the village opened outward. The cottages gave way to orchards, then to meadows, and beyond the meadows lay the silver bend of the river. The sky had deepened now. The gold of sunset was becoming rose, and the rose was slowly dissolving into blue. High above the hills, the first evening star had appeared, small and steady. At the edge of the river field, long tables had been set beneath the old sycamore trees. Lantern poles stood nearby waiting to be lit. Blankets covered the grass in soft patches of color. Bowls of berries, baskets of bread, wheels of mild cheese, jars of cream, and pitchers of cool mint water had been arranged for anyone who wanted them. There was music too, but only just beginning. A woman named Sarah sat on a low stool with a small harp resting against her shoulder. Her fingers moved across the strings gently, drawing out notes that seemed less played than remembered. The melody drifted over the grass and settled near the river, where reeds bowed their heads in the dimming light. Elian and Mara found their usual place beneath an alder tree, not too close to the tables and not too far from the water. From there, they could see the whole meadow and the river beyond it, curving away into the shadowed trees. They spread a blanket on the grass, then set the lantern basket in the middle. Mara lowered herself carefully onto the blanket, sighing with quiet contentment. "This is a good place," she said. "It is always our place," Elian replied. "Yes," said Mara, "and still each year it is new." Elian sat beside her and looked around. The villagers were settling in small groups. Some talked in low voices, some simply watched the evening. Children who had been asked not to run moved through the grass in slow, exaggerated steps, pretending to be herons. A few dogs lay with their noses on their paws, their eyes half closed, as if they too understood that this night belonged to softness. Near the water, the lantern keeper was preparing the first flame. The lantern keeper was an old man named Oro, whose white beard reached the middle of his chest, and whose hat was always slightly too large for his head. He carried a long taper, and beside him walked his granddaughter Nia, holding a small covered lamp. Every year, Oro lit the festival lanterns, one by one from that single lamp, which had been kept burning in the village hall since morning. It was said that the lamp flame came from the first Firefly festival many generations ago. Of course, flames could not live for generations. Everyone knew that. And yet, every year, the villagers treated it as though it had. Oro lifted the taper to the lamp. A little flame caught, flickered, and steadied. Then he began moving slowly from pole to pole, lighting each hanging lantern. Nia walked beside him, careful and proud. One by one, warm lights appeared around the meadow. Not bright lights, not lights that pushed away the darkness. Gentle lights. Lights that seemed to invite the darkness closer so the two could rest together. Elian watched as the lanterns glowed amber, honey, apricot, and pale gold. Their reflections trembled on the river's surface. The water carried each reflection away a little, stretching it into ribbons before letting it vanish. Soon it was time for the flower lanterns. Mara took the bellflower lantern from the basket and handed it to Elian. Then she took the taper they had brought from home and lit it from one of the festival poles. The flame was small and blue at its base, golden at its tip. Elian held her lantern steady while Mara touched the flame to the tiny candle within. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the bellflower lantern filled with light. Its paper petals glowed softly, the pale blue edges deepening to dusk. It looked almost alive, as though it might nod on its stem. They lit the others one at a time. The poppy, the daisy, the clover, the foxglove, the jasmine, and finally, the little closed bud. When all 7 were glowing, the blanket seemed to hold a garden made of moonlit paper. A hush moved through the meadow, not because anyone had called for silence, but because the valley itself had shifted. The music softened, the breeze settled. The river seemed to smooth itself. The sun had disappeared behind the hills, and in the reeds along the far bank, one tiny green light blinked. Elian saw it first, or thought she did. Then another appeared. Then 3 more. The lights glimmered low among the grasses, vanishing and returning, each one no larger than a thought. A child gasped softly, and his mother placed a finger to her lips, though she was smiling. The villagers turned toward the river. The fireflies were waking. At first they rose slowly from the reeds, as if unsure whether the evening was ready. Their lights blinked in pauses, scattered and shy. One drifted over the water, another circled a willow branch. A few hovered near the meadow's edge, their green-gold lamps pulsing gently in the blue air. Elian held her breath without meaning to. Then Mara's hand found hers. "Breathe," Mara whispered. And Elian did. She breathed in the scent of grass and river water. She breathed out the excitement that had gathered in her chest. She let herself grow still. More fireflies rose. Dozens now, then hundreds. They lifted from the riverbank in quiet waves, blinking and drifting, weaving through the shadows. Beneath the trees, their lights reflected in the water until it seemed that the river had stars flowing beneath its surface. The meadow became full of small wandering lanterns, each one carrying its own gentle rhythm. The fireflies did not hurry. They did not swarm wildly or crowd together. They moved with soft purpose, as if following music too delicate for human ears. Elian watched one drift toward their blanket. It floated above the clover lantern, blinked twice, then rose again. For one bright second, the lantern and the firefly seemed to answer each other. Mara smiled. "They approve," she said. Elian looked at her grandmother, whose face was warmed by lantern light and softened by shadow. Her eyes reflected the fireflies, making it look as if tiny stars had settled there. "What are they looking for?" Elian asked. Mara leaned back against the trunk of the alder tree. "Perhaps each other," she said. "Perhaps the places they once loved. Perhaps nothing at all. Perhaps they are simply shining, because that is what they were made to do." The thought settled gently in Elian's heart. Simply shining because that is what they were made to do. Across the meadow, the festival moved into its quietest and most beautiful hour. People ate slowly, sharing bread and berries. Cups were passed from hand to hand. Children lay on their backs and watched the fireflies drift above them like a second, lower sky. The harp continued its soft pattern, now joined by a wooden flute, whose notes curved through the evening like a breeze over water. As the darkness deepened, the old stories began. This too was part of the festival. No one stood on a stage. No one demanded attention. The stories simply rose here and there, From one blanket to another, from grandparents to children, from neighbors to friends. Near Elian and Mara, old Thomas told the tale of the first firefly who had borrowed a spark from a falling star and promised to use it only for gentleness. Across the grass, Sarah told of a moonlit pond where fireflies gathered to teach lost travelers how to find the path home. Someone else told a story about a young fox who followed a firefly through the forest and found not treasure, but a warm burrow, which was better. Elian listened to pieces of each story without trying to hold them all. They mingled with the music, the river, the crickets, and the soft murmur of voices. Everything became part of the same slow tapestry. After a while, Mara opened the small wrapped plum cakes from Thomas. She handed one to Elian. The cake was soft and fragrant, with sugar on top and fruit inside that tasted of late summer afternoons. They ate in tiny bites, and the sweetness lingered. Then Nia, the lantern keeper's granddaughter, came walking through the grass toward them. She was carrying a shallow wooden bowl filled with folded pieces of paper. "Wish leaves," she said. Elian knew the custom. Every year, anyone who wanted to could write a quiet wish on a small piece of paper shaped like a leaf. The wishes were not spoken aloud. They were folded and placed beneath the roots of the old sycamore at the end of the festival. Some said the tree carried them down into the earth. Others said the fireflies read them by moonlight. Nia held out the bowl. Elian chose a paper leaf the color of pale green tea. Mara chose one in soft brown. Nia offered a little pencil, then continued on through the meadow. Elian looked down at the empty leaf in her palm. Wish could be many things. A hope, a thank you, a memory, a promise. She thought about wishing for something grand, something exciting, something that might change everything. But the valley was so peaceful and the fireflies so gentle that grand wishes felt too loud for the evening. Beside her, Mara was already writing, her pencil moving slowly. Elian glanced toward the river. Fireflies hovered over the water in loose constellations. Some rose higher toward the lower branches of the trees. Some drifted close to the grass, lighting the edges of wildflowers. At last, Elian wrote, "May I remember how to be quiet enough to notice small lights?" She folded the leaf once, then twice, and held it in her hands. Mara folded hers too. "What did you wish?" Elian asked, then immediately shook her head. "No, don't tell me." Mara chuckled softly. "I would not have," she said, "but I think you might know anyway." Elian leaned against her grandmother's shoulder. The shawl smelled faintly of lavender and smoke. For a long while, they simply watched. As the night grew deeper, the fireflies became brighter, or perhaps the world around them became darker, making their glow easier to see. They filled the meadow, moving between lantern poles and tree trunks, over blankets, above baskets, around the quiet shapes of resting dogs and sleepy children. The river carried their reflections so faithfully that it seemed there were fireflies above and below, earth and water both breathing light. Then something happened that Elian had never seen before. At the far edge of the meadow, near the old stone footbridge, the fireflies began to gather. Not all of them. Just a few at first, then more. They circled above the bridge in a slow spiral, their lights pulsing one after another. The villagers turned their heads. The music faltered, then softened into a single held note. The spiral widened. The fireflies rose higher, forming a glowing ribbon that curved over the bridge, across the path, and toward the old sycamore. Their lights blinked in a pattern, not quite random, not quite understood. It looked almost like writing in the air, if writing could drift and breathe and vanish before the mind could read it. Elian sat up. "Grandmother," she whispered. Mara's eyes were fixed on the lights. "I see," she said. The ribbon of fireflies moved slowly across the meadow. No one stood, no one reached for them. Everyone watched as the glowing path passed over the grass, over the lantern tables, over the circle where the children lay, wide-eyed and silent. At last the fireflies came to the alder tree. They hovered above Elian and Mara's blanket, circling gently around the 7 flower lanterns. The lanterns glowed below. The fireflies glowed above. For a moment, the little space beneath the tree became a small universe of warm paper flowers and living stars. Elian felt no fear, only wonder. One firefly drifted lower than the others. It moved toward the smallest lantern, the closed bud, and rested there on the curved paper edge. Its light blinked once, very softly. Mara inhaled. The sound was quiet, but Elian heard it. "What is it?" she whispered. Mara did not answer at once. Her gaze remained on the firefly, resting on the little lantern. Then she reached into the pocket of her shawl and took out her folded wish leaf. Elian noticed that her grandmother's hand trembled slightly, though her face was peaceful. The firefly lifted from the lantern and circled Mara's hand. Mara smiled, and there was something in the smile that Elian could not fully name. It was happiness, but also remembering. It was sadness, perhaps, but the gentle kind, the kind that has made a home inside love. "When I was your age," Mara said softly, "my sister and I made a lantern just like that one, a closed bud. She said it was for dreams that needed more time." Elian knew that Mara had once had a sister. Her name had been Leora. She had gone away many years ago to live beyond the northern hills, and though letters had come for a time, they had eventually stopped. Not from anger, Mara had always said. Only distance and life and years passing the way rivers pass. Mara looked up at the circling fireflies. "I wish tonight that wherever she is, she has found a peaceful place to rest." The firefly above her hand glowed brighter. Only a little, but enough. Then the ribbon of fireflies began to move again, slowly lifting from the alder tree and drifting toward the old sycamore, where the wish leaves would be placed. The single firefly that had rested on the bud lantern lingered a moment longer. Then it too rose and followed the others. Elian slipped her hand into Mara's. The meadow remained silent until the fireflies reached the sycamore. There they spread among the branches, blinking gently from leaf to leaf. The old tree seemed to fill with stars. Then the flute resumed. One soft note, then another. The harp answered, and the festival breathed again. People did not speak loudly afterward. They did not try to explain what had happened. In Lumen Vale, beautiful mysteries were allowed to remain mysteries. They were not pulled apart or trapped in jars of certainty. They were held gently, like a sleeping bird. A little later, Oro the lantern keeper rose from his stool and walked toward the sycamore. Nia followed with the wooden bowl, now full of folded wish leaves gathered from across the meadow. One by one, the villagers came forward and added their wishes to the hollow among the sycamore roots. Elian and Mara went together. The grass was cool beneath their feet. Fireflies drifted around them, never quite touching, always near. At the base of the sycamore, the roots rose from the earth like the backs of old sleeping creatures. The hollow between them was lined with moss. Mara placed her wish leaf down first. Elian placed hers beside it. For a moment, both leaves rested together, pale green and soft brown, before Nia gently covered them with a handful of flower petals. The sycamore's bark was rough and silver in the lantern light. Elian touched it with her fingertips. Thank you, she thought, though she did not know exactly who she was thanking. The tree, the valley, the fireflies, the evening. Her grandmother, the old story, the quiet, perhaps all of them. After the wishes were placed, the festival began to soften toward its ending. Not quickly. Nothing in Lumen Vale ended quickly on Firefly Night. It loosened slowly, like a ribbon, untied by careful fingers. Some families folded blankets and carried sleeping children home. Others stayed by the river a little longer. The food on the tables grew sparse. The lanterns burned lower. The music became slower, then quieter, then only a few notes now and then, like drops of water falling into a still pool. Elian and Mara returned to their alder tree. The 7 flower lanterns were still glowing, though the candles inside had grown small. The closed bud lantern seemed different somehow, not changed in shape, but changed in meaning. Elian looked at it and thought of dreams waiting patiently for their time to open. Mara leaned back against the tree and closed her eyes. Are you tired? Elian asked. Very pleasantly, Mara said. Elian smiled. Across the river, the reeds whispered. Beyond them, the dark trees stood close together, their leaves holding pockets of night. The fireflies were beginning to drift lower again, returning gradually to the grasses and riverbanks. Their bright waves had become scattered sparks. Elian felt sleepiness moving through her own body. It began behind her eyes, then settled into her shoulders, her hands, her knees. The meadow blurred at the edges, not because she could not see, but because everything had become so soft. Mara opened her eyes and looked toward the sky. Your mother loved this part, she said. Elian turned to her. The mention of her mother was not rare, but it always made the air feel tender. Elian's mother had died when Elian was very small, too small to remember her clearly. What Elian had were fragments, a song, a blue scarf, a laugh she may have invented from hearing others describe it. This part, Elian asked. When the festival is almost over, Mara said, when most people have stopped watching for miracles and the night becomes simple again. She said that was when the valley felt most honest. Elian looked around. There were no grand spirals now, no glowing ribbons, no hush of wonder moving through the crowd. Only the river, the grass, the old trees, the low lanterns, and a few fireflies blinking close to the ground. Simple, honest, beautiful. I think I understand, Elian said. Mara nodded. I thought you might. They sat quietly until the small candles in their flower lanterns began to go out one by one. The poppy faded first, then the clover, then the daisy and the foxglove. The jasmine lantern glowed a little longer, and the bellflower longer still. At last, only the closed bud remained, its light no bigger than a pearl. Elian watched it flicker. The flame leaned left, then right. Then it went out. For a moment, smoke curled from the lantern's center, carrying the faint scent of beeswax into the night. Mara touched Elian's hand. It is time, she said. They packed the lanterns carefully into the basket. The paper was still warm. Around them, the last villagers were gathering their things. Oro was moving from pole to pole, snuffing the lanterns with a little brass cup. Each time a flame went out, the meadow grew darker, but not emptier. The fireflies remained, enough of them to show the path. Elian and Mara began the walk home. They moved slowly through the grass, past the tables, past the fountain path, past the old stone footbridge where the fireflies had first gathered. The village waited ahead, quiet beneath its mossy roofs. A few windows glowed. A cat crossed the lane and disappeared under a gate. Somewhere, water trickled over stones. The night air had cooled. Mara's shawl brushed against Elian's arm as they walked. Neither of them spoke for a while, and there was no need. The festival remained around them, not as sound, not as light, but as a feeling, a gentleness tucked inside the chest, a reminder that small lights mattered, that quiet things could still be powerful, that some wishes did not need to be answered loudly to be heard. At the cottage, Mara opened the door, and the familiar scent of chamomile and wood welcomed them in. They set the basket on the table. The room was dark except for the moonlight at the windows. Mara lit one small candle by the hearth. Its glow was just enough. Elian helped her hang the lanterns back on the shelf, where they would rest until next year, the closed bud lantern she placed in the center. For a moment, she imagined it opening in its own time, not with paper petals, but with memory or hope or some quiet brightness, not yet ready to be seen. Mara warmed a little milk with honey, and they drank it from blue cups. The cottage was very still. Outside, the last of the fireflies blinked in the garden, appearing and disappearing among the lavender. Soon Mara kissed Elian's forehead and went to her room. Elian stayed by the window a little longer. She could see the meadow beyond the lane, dark and soft, beneath the moon. She could not see the river from here, but she knew it was there, moving patiently through the valley, carrying reflections of stars, lanterns, and perhaps even wishes. A single firefly drifted near the window. It blinked once, then again. Elian smiled sleepily. "Good night," she whispered. The firefly rose into the dark and vanished among the leaves. Elian went to bed. She pulled the quilt up around her shoulders and lay still, listening to the cottage breathe. The old beams creaked softly. A breeze touched the curtains. Far away, the river whispered to the reeds. The sounds were gentle and familiar, each one arriving with space around it. Her thoughts began to slow. She saw again the meadow filled with lanterns, the river shining with reflected fireflies, the old sycamore holding wishes in its roots, her grandmother's face lit with memory, the little closed bud lantern glowing in the dark. And then those images softened too. They drifted apart like fireflies moving into tall grass. The village of Lumen Vale slept. The baker's ovens cooled. The fountain rested beneath floating petals. The tables in the meadow stood empty under the trees. The sycamore kept its quiet watch. Roots curled around folded wishes. Along the riverbank, fireflies settled among the reeds, their lights blinking more and more slowly. The valley grew still. The sky deepened. The moon moved gently over the roofs and gardens, over the orchard, over the meadow path, over the river flowing on and on through the sleeping dark. And in that peaceful valley, all things rested. The lanterns rested. The flowers rested. The river rested in its motion. The trees rested in their roots. Even the stars seemed to shine more softly, as though not wanting to wake anyone below. Now the story grows quieter. The path is fading. The meadow is dim. Only a few small lights remain, blinking gently far away. One breath in, one breath out. Nothing more is needed. The night holds every worry and lets it dissolve. The earth is steady beneath all things. The air is soft. The river is slow. The fireflies are sleeping now, tucked among the reeds, their tiny lamps dimmed, until another evening, another summer, another quiet festival beneath the trees. And you may rest too. Let the story drift away. Let the valley drift away. Let yourself sink into the calm dark, where everything is safe and soft and still. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.